What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over what I think is the most underrated weapon in Fortnite's K-pop Demon Hunters update, and that is going to be the tactical AR. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below which weapon you think hasn't been getting very much attention within the community, but is actually very good, which is kind of the meaning of underrated. Also, if you guys would like to use my code in the item shop, it is EvolveJake, just like my channel name is. And it is underneath the webcam at all times. So with the K-pop Demon Hunters update, a lot of weapons in the loot pool were buffed, and I feel like the TAC AR, well, it also got buffed, but it has gone pretty under the radar with all of these changes because a lot of people have been focusing on the other SMGs, and that's why I kind of outlined the definition of underrated, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to see this and they're going to say the Hollow Rush SMG is better or the Flex SMG is better, and that may be true, and you might like those guns more. But I think the TAC AR has also gotten a lot better. So the only thing that really changed was its damage was increased by 1 for every rarity. And the gold version actually got +2 damage. So it wasn't a very exciting change on paper. And I think that's why it's mostly gone under the radar. But recently I picked up a gold one because I got it from the wait at Ripped Tides. And I was surprised how much I was actually enjoying this weapon. It is a third-person weapon, so you're going to have to deal with bloom, but it's accurate enough that this really isn't going to be a problem for you in most ranges where you're going to be dealing damage anyways. I was pretty much full spraying it all the time and consistently hitting shots. You don't really need to worry about tap firing. And so that at long range, this is going to be a problem, but at most ranges where the weapon is going to be decent, you're just going to be able to full spray. No big deal. Another situation where I really don't kind of like these third-person weapons, like I said, long range is going to be a struggle, but also in fights where both you and an opponent are playing off of cover, it can be a bit of a struggle to use these third-person weapons if your opponent is using cover well. So I'll have a fight on screen now where me and an enemy are both in bunkers, and he's peeking just barely showing his head, right? And I'm able to beam him for a lot of damage with the Deadeye AR, not only because it's perfectly accurate at range, but also the Deadeye AR has a very high headshot multiplier, which is perfect for these situations. And so I'm able to get a lot of damage on him, easily push him, and then clean up the fight. It's no big deal. The third-person weapons in this situation would have been a lot harder to use because I'm not going to be able to land nearly as much shots or get like a relevant amount of damage. And in these situations where like the enemy is using cover and you're using cover, it doesn't have to be very long range. Even at like medium range, these kind of like stalemates will happen. And these are the situations where I feel like the third person weapons really struggle. And the TAC AR really isn't too different here. I also think if your opponent is using cover well, it's something that makes the third person weapons really difficult to use. Lots of players have been loving the Hollow Rush SMG and the Flex SMG, like I said earlier, because in this update, those were also buffed. And I just feel like the TAC AR, it also got buffed. It also got better, but it has been mostly ignored because people have been focusing so much on those other SMGs. And with all of these alternative weapons, like I think most people would agree, probably the Deadeye or the MK7 are the best like long range weapons. And because of long range fights and because of how fights play out around cover, those red dot weapons are going to be your choice. But these third person weapons, these alternative choices, you get a better spray weapon for close range, which can be really helpful and really impactful in certain fights. But I feel like one of the areas where the TAC AR really shines over these other SMGs is going to be range. So the Flex SMG will drop off to 65% of its base damage at 80 meters and 63% of its max damage at 130 meters. While the TAC AR at its lowest, it drops off to 85% of its damage, so it's only losing 15%, and this happens at 100 meters. So at ranges where the Flex SMG is doing 65% of its damage, the TAC AR is still going to be doing 85% of its damage. And I feel like in those range situations, all of these weapons definitely feel worse than the Deadeye, but the TAC AR feels significantly better than the Flex SMG and the Hollow Rush SMG. And so ideally with any of these third-person weapons, you're going to want to avoid long-range fights, right? But a time where I really noticed the damage drop-off of the SMGs like kind of bothering me most is when the enemies are using mobility. And this is something that is going to happen a lot because there's a lot of mobility in the KPop Demon Hunters update. So when a player is shockwaving away or wingsuiting away, I feel like they are much more likely to get away from me when I'm using one of these SMG style weapons. And the TAC AR having a bit more range and not losing out on as much damage at range felt a lot better to me when it came to dealing with these players using mobility. And I think this is extremely important in zero build. Like, very, very important on like a high list of my priorities is dealing with enemies using mobility, because most decent players aren't just going to sit there and let you 250 to 0 them in medium range fights. They're going to get to cover. They're going to try to make the fight a stalemate. And if they don't have any cover, they're going to be shockwaving away or they're going to be wingsuiting away. And if your SMG is doing very little damage at the range you're fighting already, and then the enemy starts shockwaving away or they start wingshooting away and you're hitting for like barely double digits or single digits in some instances, those enemy players are much more likely to get away. And that is going to make the entire game much harder for you, because at that point, you're going to need to either just chase them to get that elimination or just let them go. Neither of which is ideal. Like, obviously there's times where you're chasing, but if your weapon kind of like forces you into situations where you're always chasing enemy players, you're going to be probably using mobility that you would rather not have used and potentially getting in situations that you aren't as prepared for. And a lot of shooters over chasing enemies is a problem. And Fortnite is no different. We all do it from time to time, but the more you're doing it, the more it's going to backfire on you. And using these SMG style weapons, you're probably going to end up having to chase a lot or letting players go, which allows them to heal up, reset the fight, and then maybe get decent timing on you. Capitalizing on good timing, especially versus decent players, the more threatening players in the lobby, and getting them out of the game while you do have that, opportunistic timing is very important, because the faster you can get rid of players, the less likely you are to get third-partied. The faster you're able to get rid of these better players, not only are you less likely to get third-partied if you're not fighting for as long, but these people aren't going to have as many opportunities to turn the fight. And if you give a decent player, several opportunities to reset or several opportunities to, turn the fight, it's probably going to backfire on you eventually. So I just think with the TAC AR's more range, I didn't mind enemies using mobility as much. I didn't feel like they were as guaranteed to just get away from me for free. And you also have the better kind of hipfire and the better close range of the TAC AR. So it's like, it's worse at just being a spray weapon than the SMGs are, but it's better at being a spray weapon than the Deadeye is. It's worse at really long range or beaming enemies using mobility than the Deadeye, but it's a lot better at long range or beaming enemies using mobility than the other SMGs. So it's kind of like a somewhat best of both worlds, where it has the strengths of each of the kind of style of weapons that we've been talking about. I still much prefer the Deadeye, obviously, but the point of this video was underrated, not best. Underrated is something that's good and not really getting the recognition it deserves. And I think the TAC AR is still getting underrated even after the KPop Demon Hunters update, probably more so. So I made a video about the TAC AR being underrated early on in Chapter 7, but I think with these changes, even more underrated than it was before, because it got better and pretty much nobody is talking about it because the other SMGs have been getting a lot of attention. And the whole point of this video wasn't that you shouldn't use those other SMGs if you like them, but more so like give the TAC AR a chance if you're looking for something different, or if you're in a situation where, maybe you get rebooted and you don't have much loot, you happen upon a good TAC AR, that's something you can use. Also, light ammo weapons are nice for situations where you need to share ammo with teammates, and that will happen a lot if you're kind of trying to regain in a scuffed match. So, like I said, I prefer the Deadeye, but if I have a gold TAC AR or a high rarity TAC AR, I'm definitely more likely to consider using it now than I would have been a few days ago. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you found this video to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.